In the sweltering heat of Babylon, a king known for commanding an empire stretching from Greece to India lies gravely ill, surrounded by his closest generals and physicians. A great empire holds its breath as a new chapter unfolds in history. Alexander III of Macedon, known simply as Alexander the Great, faced the end of his extraordinary journey in June of 323 BCE. Precisely what transpired in the 72 hours before his death is a matter clouded by scarce records and contested accounts, but a foundational timeline can still be constructed. 72 hours before his passing, Alexander was at the height of his campaign, having returned to Babylon after years of relentless expansion across continents. The great city was a hub of culture, power, and sprawling influence. Known historically for his robust physicality and relentless energy, he had recently begun displaying signs of fatigue and illness. His companions noted a decline in the usual vigor of his once tireless presence. 50 hours before his death, Alexander was reported to be suffering from a high fever. The exact cause remains unknown. Historical consensus suggests several hypotheses, including infectious disease, complications from previous battle wounds, or perhaps dilutional effects from excessive alcohol consumption. His physicians in Babylon, skilled yet limited by the medical understanding of their time, administered treatments steeped more in tradition than efficacy. The king's condition remained stubbornly unchanged, and the fever visibly sapped his strength. 48 hours before the fatal moment, Alexander summoned his closest generals and advisors. They gathered within the opulent halls of his palace, his commands still sharp despite physical decline. Plans for further campaigns were discussed, albeit haltingly, as Alexander's speech showed intermittent signs of weakness. His entourage, aware that the king was unwell, deliberated over the succession without public declaration. No trusted heir had yet been officially named. The future remained uncertain, cloaked in the shadows of court intrigue. Approximately 36 hours before death, Alexander's illness worsened, now accompanied by increasing lethargy. He was confined to his bed, attended by physicians and companions. The vibrant strategist, who navigated means and messages across continents, was reduced to fragile whispers. Reports from contemporary historians like Plutarch and Arrian relay that Alexander's physical suffering mixed with emotional turmoil, though the specifics of his state remain disputed and undocumented by direct sources. 24 hours before his death, the fever persisted, perhaps waxing and waning yet uncompromising. Any hope for recovery diminished visibly. The king's attendants recorded his inability to rise, his fatigue unlike any seen before. The court's atmosphere thickened, a palpable tension settled over Babylon. While plans for Alexander's empire were nascent, no formal arrangements were enacted in these final hours. Around 12 hours prior to his death, Alexander showed signs of delirium. It is unknown whether this was a neurological complication or the systemic effect of his illness. His companions watched in silent apprehension as the king's condition progressively deteriorated. Physicians continued their ministrations, limited in capability and knowledge. Detailed medical descriptions are absent in primary documents, leaving much of this phase open to historical interpretation but constrained by fact. 6 hours before the end, Alexander's breathing grew labored. His speech faltered, and his usual commanding presence was reduced to a pale shadow. He remained in his chambers within the palace, which overlooked the lush gardens and the grand Euphrates River, symbols of the vast lands he had conquered. The scene was one of quiet disintegration, the vibrant force of the past days now fading into stillness. 3 hours from death, the gathering of generals had grown anxious. Muted conversations suggested awareness of the imminent loss. Alexander's attendants maintained vigil, offering what care they could. The great king showed no outward dramatics, only an ongoing physical retreat from life. No extraordinary measures beyond contemporary medical practice were recorded. Alexander was fully conscious at times, but mostly unresponsive near the end. In the final hour, time slowed within the chambers of the dying king. Breath came shallow and measured. The medical practitioner's efforts had failed to alter the inexorable course. Friends and loyal soldiers stood watch, sober and silent. Alexander's empire, a mosaic of cultures and battles, waited on the precipice of history. As the final moments passed, the king of Macedon drew his last breath. No definitive cause of death stands uncontested. Theories include typhoid fever, malaria, or complications from old injuries, but all remain ultimately unresolved. Alexander's death in June of 323 BCE left a power vacuum that fragmented his vast empire. His generals and successors divided lands that had once answered to a single will. The administrative and military structures began to crumble, leading to decades of conflict and reorganization. The absence of a clear heir or succession plan meant the unity he forged dissolved quickly. Babylon, once the beating heart of his empire, became the symbolic site of an ending and the uncertain dawn of change. This recounting relies solely on historical consensus and acknowledges the gaps in primary documentation. The final 72 hours reflect not heroism or mythic grandeur, but the fragile mortality behind one of history's most compelling figures. Alexander's last moments remain a testament to the limits of human endurance, even for a man who reshaped the world.